Alright everybody, there are two links in the description of this video to extremely worthy things that you should definitely check out. They can't be posted on YouTube. A couple years ago they were censored. Thankfully a fan actually got me the links. They were posted on archive.org. Everything should be archived. It's a great idea. I decided to put them on Brighteon, links in the description. I also put them on BitChute, Dailymotion, and Library, but they're a bit less searchable on these sites. The searchability levels vary from time to time. Anyway, so you can check them out at your leisure. And it's a very edgy show, but the whole basic idea of the Great Satan at Large, and this is why it's ironic that it would be banned off of YouTube. The whole purpose was to mock and satirize evangelicals and government censorship. That was the point of the show. They did this by having Lou Perfidio, who's the host, dress up as Satan and talk about satiating your pleasures and fuck government, fuck, local evangelicals, preachers, and so forth, fuck moralism. It's a wholesome show. After only 2 episodes, both of these links, each one. The second one is my favorite, the Israel 666 episode, where I guess that was the name of some other host they were trying to kick off the air, who was like basically saying crazy shit. And I'm not sure about the full context there, but he went to Arizona and made these shows. They ended up actually forcing him to flee. He was facing state-level charges, felony charges of indecency and obscenity and some of these other things. It was very funny. Anyway, here's the irony. The irony is that this man's material in the early 90s, we're talking almost 30 years ago, got banned because of evangelicals whining and bitching about this public access show. It's now, almost 30 years later, been banned on the mainline internet all over again. If you look at references to it, you'll find some clips on the internet, but the full episodes were only on archive.org. Thank goodness that service exists, or I'd have to put out the call probably and buy one of the discs that they were selling for a while that had these episodes. I can remember there was some Eastern European site that had all sorts of good talk show shit. And actually, that's where I got a bunch of the Nicholas and Xena stuff. A bunch of the Radio Werewolf material actually came from them years and years ago. Stanton LaVey interviews and a little bit of everything. Unfortunately, I think they closed up shop, the actual site I was using. But I got all sorts of good stuff, including The Great Satan at Large, although they didn't have the second episode at the time, I think. And I thought it was hilarious when I first watched it. This was early wave YouTube. We're talking maybe 2010 or so. Now it's been banned. How very funny. The same thing has happened again. The technology that has allowed people to express themselves, to say things that are taboo, that's the whole point. When you create a new platform, the taboo tend to be what builds it. This is now happening a third time. It happened with TV. It happened with public access specifically. Then obscenity laws were brought in, and for the most part, that died down. Then you had the internet. And the internet, well, actually, technically it's fourth wave that we're on. The early wave internet and social media are two totally different things. Early wave internet comes, people can post things on their websites. Very quickly, registrars and so forth begin shutting down some of the more obscene material. Social media emerges, including hosting sites, platforming at the mass level like YouTube. They're doing the same. Now we have alt tech. And alt tech, by the way, eventually will go the same way. Eventually those sites will grow, and if they become large enough, they'll feel pressure to start suppressing ideas. It's not clear that sites set up explicitly and contractually as libertarian sites will be able to make that transition the same way, which I think would be a good thing if they didn't, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, they're now platforming the same material again. Here you've got Lou Perfidio's performance art, which is what it is, and he claims this openly. Getting banned for, the third time in human history. This is a dude who died in his 40s, was an unrepentant punk alcoholic, probably a left-winger, and his material is still getting booted off of mainline tech. And I think that that's regrettable. And I think that whatever is taboo, whatever is censored, should definitely be protected. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. It doesn't matter if it's even of interest to you. I've started archiving political and other materials now that I think might be banned in the next half-decade or so, simply out of habit now. I've got hundreds of files that I'm backing up. I'm looking for the possibility in the future of having a very large long-term archival storage of all sorts of different material. with the idea that 20, 30 years from now, when technology changes, as it will over time, there will be a demand for it. The same material will be dug out again. This is something that when it was first posted on YouTube, we're talking mid-2000s, late 2000s, wasn't that old yet. It wasn't even 20 years old. Now it's been banned again. And it could have been lost if not for archive.org existing, because again, no full versions of it existed. How many people actually kept, once they got the files off of the DVD that they ordered from this East European site, how many of these people even kept necessarily the original disc? How many of them kept the files backed up once they put it online? How many people even bought it in the first place? It's probably measured in the tens. Not that many people would have it. Certainly they wouldn't be looking for it if they have their own copy of it. So nobody would even know it had been erased from the larger internet. It could have gone extinct. This material could have gone extinct. I don't think that a form of expression that is deliberately satirical in the political context in the first place should be ever erased. By the way, it's interesting. The way in which the evangelicals and moral majority-ists treated Perfidio and similar performance art and so-called obscene material at the time is exactly how people who now have pink hair and cut off their limbs and call themselves trans-crippled in some cases are acting now. Perpetually offended. You have soccer moms that don't want to, they want the government to raise their child because they're too lazy to do so. And they howl with rage when the news tells them that something has offended them. The news comes on and it tells the soccer mom or the idiot dad who, you know, the dink who works 50-hour weeks because he doesn't want to be around his kids. These people howl in rage because the New York Times or CNN tells them that something offensive happened on the internet. Oh my God, there's extremism and I care so much about my kids. Something must be done. You don't care about your kids. You're not monitoring their habits. You give them your iPad, you give them your fucking laptop or a smartphone, and then you just let them do whatever you want. You think that putting some family control filter on a phone is going to stop them from doing whatever they want to do? Well, I mean, that's bullshit. The youngest generation will run rings around you technologically, always has, always will. I ran rings around my parents technologically, and my school, and later my college. It's inevitable. There's nothing you can do about it. You should be the one who is empowering yourself to do such things. But unfortunately, these people are goddamn lazy and never do that. So link in the description. And by the way, I will always continue to upload such edgy content. If it's not welcome on YouTube, well then YouTube won't benefit from the views from it. It'll slowly get hemorrhaged. It'll slowly get parasitized by these other sites over time. These sites will simply exist and therefore win long term. I don't say this happily because I spent over a decade being a YouTuber primarily, putting all the content on there, and now I have to promulgate it elsewhere, to the exclusion of even promulgating it in some cases on YouTube because of the constant threat of being harassed by this perpetually outraged modern-day lynch mob of people that 30 years ago, opportunists as they were, would be putting on suits, pretending to be religious, and giving a sermon. These people would pretend to be religious in order to fucking con people back in the 80s and 90s. They pretend to be progressive to do that now. They're not really progressive. They're just perpetually outraged busybodies. They are bored. Intellectually lazy worms. And so, yes, the great Satan at large rides again. I have a feeling somewhere out there there's a third episode. Because it seems like there's a gap. Perfidio, somebody can do a little internet archaeology, maybe see about this. And he's unfortunately supposedly dead, and I have no idea who these other people were. I'm sure that at least a couple of them are alive because they all looked younger than Perfidio was. This is only the early 90s. It's not ancient history. It's like Gen Xers and shit. He mentions things that supposedly happened on his show that obviously didn't in the first episode. That begs the question, is he referring to something that was off camera, or is he referring to an intermittent episode before the final one, which is the one where he goes crazy with the preacher? I'm thinking there's a third episode. If that's the case, I want it. That would be epic. It would be legendary. It would probably be in similar shitty Betamax style quality, but it would be there. So many good things have been purged off the internet. Thankfully, I tend to have like a little bit of an encyclopedic memory when it comes to that particular kind of media, so I can continue to search for them, but it gets harder and harder over time. Time is of the essence. Archive everything, especially legacy media articles. That way we can hold them up to the standards of their own lying, number one, and number two, you can spread the link without them getting any ad revenue. Especially for the New York Slimes and the Atlantic and other paywall so-called journalistic sites, the WAPO. Yeah, deprive them of all their money. Then they'll really howl for censorship. That's about all. Peace out.